The black bride begged, "Will you protect me?" The mountain man's weathered hands tightened on his rifle as snow whipped through the cabin door. "Only if you're my wife." The bounty hunters saw her as nothing more than escaped property, worth $300 dead or alive. The townspeople whispered she'd be in shackles by sunrise, another runaway crushed by the territory's unforgiving justice. But the grizzled hermit who'd buried his own family in these mountains recognized something else in her desperate eyes, the same fierce will to survive that had kept him alive through 5 brutal winters alone. What neither the hunters nor the mountain man knew was that sewn into her tattered dress were surveyor's maps worth more than all the gold in Colorado territory, secrets that powerful men would kill to possess. Would this marriage of survival destroy them both or forge the partnership that brings down the most corrupt judge in the West? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The blizzard had been raging for 3 days when Mercy Washington finally spotted the abandoned trading post through the white curtain of snow. Her fingers, numb beneath worn gloves, clutched the leather satchel tighter against her chest. The Colorado Territory stretched endlessly around her, unforgiving and brutal in the winter of 1867. She pushed through the heavy wooden door, grateful for any shelter from the storm. The interior smelled of old tobacco and dust. Empty shelves lined the walls. A stone fireplace dominated one corner, cold and dark. Mercy sank onto a wooden crate, exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. The freedom papers in her coat pocket were legitimate, but Captain Wade Morrison and his men didn't seem to care about legal documents. They'd been hunting her for 6 days now, claiming she was escaped property. Their horses had been gaining ground before the storm hit. Mercy opened her satchel and checked the contents. Maps and surveys, carefully rolled and protected by oiled cloth, filled every inch of space. These documents represented years of meticulous work, recording mining claims and geological surveys across the territory. Her former employer had trusted her completely, never suspecting she understood the true value of what she copied and filed. The door burst open. A tall man stepped inside, rifle raised and ready. Ice crystals clung to his dark beard. His eyes, sharp and suspicious, swept the room before settling on her. "This is my supply cache." His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to solitude. "You're trespassing." Mercy stood slowly, hands visible. "I mean no harm, just seeking shelter from the storm." He studied her torn dress, her worn boots, the way she protected the satchel. "You're being followed." It wasn't a question. Mercy nodded. "Bounty hunters. 3 miles back, maybe less." He moved to the window, scanning the white landscape. "They've been circling this area for hours." "You've seen them?" "Captain Morrison's crew. They're asking about a runaway." His gaze returned to her face. "That you?" Mercy lifted her chin. "I'm a free woman. Have the papers to prove it." "Papers don't mean much out here." He lowered the rifle slightly. "Morrison's got territorial warrants. Claims you stole property." "I stole nothing." The man walked to the fireplace, kicking at the cold ashes. "Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what he can prove in court." Hoofbeats thundered outside, growing louder. Morrison's voice carried through the wind, shouting orders to his men. The cabin suddenly felt like a trap. "Please." Mercy stepped toward the stranger. "I need protection." He turned, studying her with calculating eyes. "Protection costs. I can pay. Not talking about money." He moved to the door, checking the latch. "Frontier law's simple. Unmarried women got no legal standing. Can't testify in court. Can't own property. Can't refuse a lawful arrest." The hoofbeats circled closer. Mercy's heart hammered against her ribs. "But married women do." The mountain man faced her fully. "Wife's got her husband's legal protection. Can't be taken without his consent." Understanding dawned cold and sharp. "You're saying, 'Only if you're my wife.'" The words hung between them like a blade. Outside, Morrison's men were dismounting, their voices growing clearer. Mercy clutched the satchel tighter, thinking of the surveys inside, the knowledge that could change everything. I don't even know your name. Ezra Stone. Been living in these mountains 5 years. He jerked his head toward the approaching voices. You got about 30 seconds to decide. Mercy closed her eyes, weighing her options. Morrison would drag her back in chains. The territorial judge would side with the captain's warrants. Her freedom papers would disappear into some clerk's file, forgotten forever. Yes. Ezra nodded once, moving to bar the door. Then you're under my protection now, Mrs. Stone. Heavy boots stomped onto the wooden porch outside. Morrison's fist pounded against the door. Stone, open up! We know she's in there. Ezra cracked the door open, rifle barrel visible in the gap. Captain Morrison, what brings you to my property in this weather? Got a federal warrant for the woman you're harboring. Hand her over. What woman? Ezra's voice remained steady, casual. Don't play games with me, Mountain Man. We tracked her here. Tracked who here? Ezra stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. Been alone for days. Mercy pressed against the wall, listening to the muffled conversation. Her new husband was buying time, but Morrison wouldn't be fooled for long. That's my wife you're talking about. Ezra's voice carried clearly now. Married her proper this morning. Your wife? Morrison's tone sharpened with disbelief. The hermit got himself hitched? Man gets lonely up here. Found myself a good woman. She's a runaway slave, Stone. Worth $300 to her rightful owner. She's a free woman with papers, and she's my legal wife. Ezra's boots creaked on the porch boards. You want her. You'll need more than territorial warrants. Silence stretched between them. Mercy counted heartbeats, waiting for Morrison's response. This isn't over, Stone. Never thought it was. The horses moved away, but not far. Morrison was regrouping, not retreating. Ezra returned inside, securing the door with heavy wooden bars. They'll be back. He moved to gather supplies from hidden caches around the room. Tonight. Probably. Maybe sooner. Mercy watched him work with efficient, practiced movements. Why did you help me? Ezra paused, his hands still on a rope coil. Every person deserves a fighting chance. He resumed packing, but Mercy caught something in his expression, a shadow of old pain. This man understood loss, understood running from things that couldn't be outrun. The storm continued raging outside, but inside the trading post, two strangers had become allies against forces neither could face alone. Morrison's men returned at dusk, surrounding Ezra's main cabin 2 miles deeper into the mountains. Mercy crouched behind the thick log walls, watching armed figures position themselves in the tree line. 6 men, all carrying rifles. Ezra moved methodically through the cabin, checking ammunition and blocking windows with heavy wooden shutters. His movements held the confidence of someone who'd prepared for this moment many times before. They won't wait for morning, he said, securing the last shutter. Morrison's not patient. Mercy's satchel lay open on the wooden table, its contents spread before them. Detailed maps covered every surface, each one marked with precise geological notations and survey measurements. I need to show you something. She pulled out the most comprehensive chart. This isn't just about me being a runaway. Ezra glanced at the map, then stopped completely. His weathered finger traced the elevation lines and mineral markers. These are mining surveys. Complete territorial surveys. Every major deposit from here to Denver. Mercy pointed to dozens of marked locations. Gold, silver, copper, most of it unclaimed land. Where did you get these? Judge Samuel Garrett owned the largest mining operation in the territory. I worked as his record keeper for 3 years. She pulled out another map, this one showing claim boundaries. He trusted me to file all his surveys and legal documents. Ezra studied the intricate markings, recognizing the value immediately. These maps are worth fortunes. Garrett taught me cartography, geology, even legal documentation, said I had a natural mind for numbers and measurements. Mercy's voice carried pride despite their circumstances. I speak 4 languages, translated for his business partners from Mexico and Europe. But you kept copies. I kept everything. every survey, every claim, every correspondence. She indicated a leather portfolio filled with papers. When Garrett started falsifying federal reports, I documented those too. Outside, Morrison's voice cut through the wind. "Stone! Send her out now, or we come in shooting." Ezra ignored the threat, focused entirely on the maps. "Garrett doesn't know you have these. He thinks they burned in a warehouse fire 6 months ago." Mercy rolled up the surveys carefully. "The same fire that supposedly destroyed the records of his illegal mining claims. You set that fire. I created that fire. There's a difference." She met his gaze steadily. Garrett was cheating territorial prospectors, filing false claims to steal their deposits. These maps prove everything. A rifle shot splintered the wooden door. Morrison's patience had expired. Ezra grabbed his own rifle and moved to a firing position near the front window. "Can you read terrain maps for navigation?" "Better than most surveyors." "Then find us a way out of here." He handed her a local topographical chart. "I know every trail in these mountains, but you understand elevation and geological formations." Mercy spread the terrain map across the floor, comparing it to Garrett's surveys. Her trained eye quickly identified patterns and connections that would escape most observers. "There's a mining tunnel system half a mile north." She traced the route with her finger. "Connects to 3 different mountain faces. Old silver mine, probably abandoned." "I know those tunnels. Haven't used them in years." "According to these surveys, they connect to the main road toward Pine Ridge Settlement." She looked up at him. 20 miles southeast of here." Another gunshot shattered a window. Morrison's men were testing their defenses, probing for weak points. Ezra shouldered his rifle and returned fire, not to hit anyone but to keep them back. "Pine Ridge has a federal courthouse. We get there. We can file proper marriage certificates and legal complaints. Garrett has connections throughout the territorial government, but not federal connections. Not yet." Ezra moved to gather their supplies. Territories pushing for statehood. Federal oversight's getting stronger. Mercy packed the surveys with swift efficiency, protecting each document with oiled cloth. Morrison's not just hunting a runaway. He's protecting Garrett's mining fraud, which means they can't let you reach federal authorities. A third shot punched through the back wall. Morrison was positioning men on all sides, preparing for a coordinated assault. "The tunnel entrance is behind that ridge." Ezra pointed through the rear window. "We go now in the darkness, or we don't go at all." Mercy secured the satchel and shouldered a pack of supplies. "How long to reach Pine Ridge?" "In this weather?" 2 days on foot through mountain passes." He opened the rear door carefully, scanning for movement. "Maybe 3. I've walked further in worse conditions." Ezra studied her face in the dim firelight, seeing determination instead of fear. "You're not what Morrison thinks you are. Neither are you." She followed him toward the door. "Former lawman, weren't you?" He paused, surprised. "How did you know?" "The way you handle legal questions. Your knowledge of territorial jurisdiction." Mercy adjusted her pack straps. "Plus, you know Morrison personally. Professional history. Territorial deputy. 5 years ago." Ezra's voice carried old pain. "Before I came to these mountains." "What changed?" "Lost my family to cholera outbreak in Denver. Decided civilization wasn't worth the cost." They moved through the rear door into the howling wind. Snow immediately stung their faces, but the storm would cover their escape. Morrison's shouts echoed from the front of the cabin, coordinating his men for the final assault. He had no idea his targets were already moving through the darkness toward the abandoned mine. Mercy followed Ezra's sure footsteps through the deep snow, her cartographer's mind already calculating distances and elevation changes. The maps in her satchel contained enough evidence to destroy Garrett's criminal empire, but only if they could reach federal authorities alive. The tunnel entrance appeared ahead, a black mouth in the mountainside barely visible through the swirling snow. The tunnels led them through 2 days of underground passages and mountain trails before Pine Ridge Settlement appeared in the valley below. Smoke rose from chimneys scattered among wooden buildings that seemed to huddle together against the wilderness. Mercy adjusted her satchel as they approached the main street. Her maps had proven invaluable during their escape, identifying safe routes and water sources that kept them ahead of Morrison's pursuit. Federal courthouse is the brick building at the end of town. Ezra pointed toward the largest structure. We file marriage papers first, then territorial complaints. A woman emerged from the building marked Legal Services, her dark hair pulled back severely, her dress practical rather than fashionable. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Mrs. Cross handles most legal matters in Pine Ridge. Ezra approached the woman directly. We need marriage documentation and federal assistance. Helena Cross studied them both with sharp eyes. You're the couple Morrison's been asking about. He's been here? Yesterday. Showed warrants claiming she's escaped property. Helena gestured toward her office. I told him I'd seen no one matching that description. Inside the cramped office, law books lined every wall. Helena pulled out official territorial forms while Mercy spread her most damaging surveys across the desk. These documents prove systematic mining fraud. Mercy pointed to falsified claim boundaries. Judge Garrett's been stealing legitimate prospectors' deposits for 3 years. Helena examined the surveys with growing interest. Her questions were precise, technical, revealing extensive knowledge of territorial mining law. You documented everything. Helena traced the survey markings with her finger. Dates, measurements, witness signatures. This is courtroom evidence. I kept records of every illegal transaction. Mercy pulled out correspondence files. Garrett never suspected his record keeper understood the legal implications. Ezra watched Helena work, noting her familiarity with federal procedures. You've handled mining fraud cases before. More than you might expect. Helena continued studying the documents. Territorial government's riddled with corruption. Statehood depends on cleaning it up. A commotion outside interrupted their work. Horses approached at full gallop, their riders shouting orders. Morrison had found them. Back entrance leads to the stable. Helena gathered the surveys quickly. Take these to the courthouse basement. Judge Matthews is expecting territorial business. You told him we were coming? I sent word yesterday. Helena moved toward the front door. Someone needs to delay Morrison while you reach federal protection. Ezra hesitated. He's got 6 armed men. I've got territorial law. Helena straightened her shoulders. Morrison's warrants won't hold up under federal scrutiny. They slipped through the rear door as Morrison's boots thundered onto the front porch. His voice carried clearly through the wooden walls, demanding information about fugitives and stolen property. The courthouse basement was filled with territorial records and legal documents. Judge Matthews, a thin man with graying hair, waited beside a desk covered with federal correspondence. Mrs. Cross sent word about mining fraud evidence. He examined Mercy's surveys immediately. These are remarkably detailed. 3 years of documentation. Mercy pulled out the most comprehensive files. Every fraudulent claim, every falsified report, every bribed official. Judge Matthews studied the papers with obvious expertise. You understand geological surveying. I learned from the best instructors. Mercy indicated specific measurements. Garrett taught me cartography, legal documentation, even federal filing procedures. He wanted someone who could handle complex territorial business. But you were documenting his crimes. Someone needed to keep honest records. She met his gaze directly. Garrett was stealing from legitimate prospectors, falsifying federal reports, bribing territorial officials. Ezra examined the judge's desk, noting federal seals and official letterhead. You're not just territorial authority. Federal Territorial Inspector. Matthews set down the surveys. I've been investigating corruption throughout Colorado Territory for 8 months. The revelation hit like lightning. You're federal law enforcement. Washington sent me to document irregularities before statehood proceedings. He indicated files covering his desk. Judge Garrett's been under federal investigation since last spring. And Mrs. Cross? My lead territorial investigator. Matthews smiled slightly. Helena's been building cases against corrupt officials across 3 counties. Footsteps thundered overhead as Morrison searched the courthouse. His voice echoed through the wooden floors, growing increasingly frustrated. Your evidence completes our case against Garrett. Matthews secured Mercy's documents in a federal evidence file. We needed proof of systematic fraud, not just isolated incidents. Morrison's working for Garrett directly. Ezra provided his testimony about the pursuit and threats, using false warrants to silence witnesses. Federal charges include kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. Matthews wrote rapidly on official forms. Morrison's facing 20 years in federal prison. The basement door opened suddenly. Helena descended the stairs, followed by two men wearing federal badges. Morrison's contained upstairs. She addressed Matthews directly. His warrants are completely falsified. No federal authorization, no legitimate territorial backing. Garrett's work? Obviously. Morrison confessed to receiving orders directly from the judge. Helena turned to Mercy and Ezra. Your marriage is legally binding, filed with federal territorial records. One of the federal agents spoke up. We need detailed testimony about Garrett's mining operations. Mercy pulled out additional surveys. I can provide 3 years of comprehensive documentation, every illegal claim, every falsified survey, every bribed official. Plus, witness testimony from legitimate prospectors. Helena added her own files to the evidence collection. We've been interviewing victims of Garrett's fraud across the territory. When do we arrest him? Ezra asked. Federal warrants are already issued. Matthews sealed the evidence files with official wax stamps. Garrett will be in federal custody before sunset. Morrison's voice faded from overhead, replaced by the sound of shackles and federal arrest procedures. The man who'd hunted them across the territory was now facing federal charges that would end his career permanently. Your evidence broke open the entire conspiracy. Helena addressed Mercy directly. Garrett's criminal network included 12 territorial officials and 6 mining companies. What happens now? Federal trial in Denver. Full territorial reform before statehood. Matthews gathered his official papers, and your mining surveys become the foundation for legitimate territorial development. Outside, Pine Ridge settled into evening quiet, no longer threatened by corruption that had poisoned territorial government for years. Judge Samuel Garrett arrived in Pine Ridge the next morning with a contingent of territorial marshals and a wagon full of official documents. His imposing figure commanded attention as he strode down the main street, black coat billowing behind him like storm clouds. Word of his arrival spread quickly through the settlement. Shopkeepers emerged from their stores. Residents gathered on porches and street corners. Everyone knew about Morrison's arrest, but Garrett's presence meant the real confrontation was just beginning. Mercy watched from the courthouse window as Garrett deployed his men around key buildings. His strategy was methodical, professional, designed to control every avenue of escape or communication. He's moving fast. Ezra joined her at the window. Knows his time is limited. Helena Cross reviewed federal paperwork at the main desk. Her movements calm despite the tension building outside. Garrett's desperate. Federal investigation became public knowledge when we arrested Morrison. What's his play? Judge Matthews examined the deployment of territorial marshals through field glasses. He can't simply override federal authority. He'll try to arrest Mercy before the federal hearing concludes. Helena indicated forged warrants spread across Garrett's command table. Claim she's a fugitive who stole territorial property. Garrett's voice boomed across the settlement square, addressing gathered residents with practiced authority. He spoke of law and order, of dangerous fugitives threatening territorial security, of the need for swift justice. Citizens of Pine Ridge, I come bearing official warrants for the arrest of a known criminal. Garrett held up falsified documents. This woman has stolen valuable territorial surveys and corrupted honest legal proceedings. Several residents nodded agreement. Garrett's reputation carried weight throughout the territory. His word had been law for years. However, federal authority supersedes territorial jurisdiction in this matter. Matthews stepped onto the courthouse porch, his own documents visible. This woman is under federal protection as a material witness. Federal protection? Garrett's voice sharpened with challenge. Based on what authority? Based on her cooperation in a federal investigation of territorial corruption. Matthews unfolded his official credentials. Investigation that includes systematic mining fraud and judicial misconduct. The crowd stirred uneasily. Federal investigations meant serious charges, the kind that could destroy careers and change territorial politics permanently. Garrett studied Matthews carefully, recognizing a worthy opponent. You're claiming jurisdiction over territorial mining disputes. I'm claiming jurisdiction over federal crimes committed on territorial land. Matthews gestured toward the courthouse. Crimes documented by 3 years of meticulous record-keeping. Records stolen by a fugitive slave. Records preserved by a legal witness to systematic fraud. Helena emerged from the courthouse carrying Mercy's surveys. Witness who documented every illegal transaction, every falsified claim, every bribed official. Mercy appeared beside Helena, her satchel prominent and her bearing confident. The crowd's attention focused on her completely, measuring this woman against Garrett's accusations. I am not stolen property. Mercy's voice carried clearly across the square. I am a free woman with legal documentation, married under territorial law, testifying under federal protection. You are a thief and a liar. Garrett moved closer, his territorial marshals flanking him. Those surveys belong to legitimate territorial businesses. These surveys document your criminal activities. Mercy pulled out specific documents. 3 years of falsified mining claims, stolen from legitimate prospectors, filed under forged federal authority. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the magnitude of accusations being leveled. If true, Garrett's crimes affected every mining operation in the territory. Prove it. Garrett's challenge rang with desperate confidence. Mercy spread the most damaging survey across a makeshift table. Mining claim filed March 1866 shows deposit boundaries extending into federal land. She pointed to specific markings. Your signature authorizing extraction beyond territorial jurisdiction. That proves nothing. It proves federal crimes. Helena produced correspondence files. Your letters to mining companies promising federal cooperation that you had no authority to provide. Judge Matthews added his own evidence. Federal investigation confirms systematic fraud affecting 37 legitimate mining claims across Colorado territory. The territorial marshals exchanged uncertain glances. Federal crimes meant federal prosecution, beyond Garrett's power to influence or control. Citizens of Pine Ridge. Garrett addressed the crowd directly. These federal agents are interfering with legitimate territorial justice. They seek to protect criminals who steal from honest businesses. We seek to prosecute criminals who steal from honest prospectors, Matthews countered, including territorial judges who abuse their authority for personal profit. The crowd was dividing, some supporting Garrett's familiar authority, others recognizing the weight of federal evidence. Pine Ridge was choosing sides in a confrontation that would determine the territory's future. Arrest that woman! Garrett ordered his marshals. Federal protection doesn't override territorial warrants. It does when territorial warrants are falsified. Helena produced Morrison's confession. Your own captain admitted receiving illegal orders to fabricate charges. The marshals hesitated, caught between competing authorities and uncertain of their legal ground. Stand down. Matthews addressed the territorial officers directly. Federal warrants supersede territorial authority in cases involving federal crimes. You have no federal warrants? Garrett's voice carried desperate authority. Matthews pulled out official documents bearing federal seals. Samuel Garrett, you are under arrest for mining fraud, judicial corruption, and conspiracy to violate federal territorial law. The square erupted in shocked murmurs. Garrett's face went pale as he realized the trap closing around him. This is territorial jurisdiction. Garrett backed toward his wagon. You have no authority here. We have complete authority. Helena signaled to federal agents positioned around the square. Washington authorized full territorial reform before statehood proceedings. Garrett's marshals stepped away from their former boss, unwilling to face federal charges themselves. The judge who had controlled territorial law for years suddenly stood alone against forces beyond his influence. The federal hearing convened in Pine Ridge's courthouse at noon. With Judge Matthews presiding over the most significant territorial corruption case in Colorado's history, residents packed every available seat while federal stenographers recorded testimony that would reshape territorial governance. Mercy took the witness stand with her leather satchel, 3 years of meticulous documentation spread before her. Her voice carried clearly as she detailed Garrett's systematic fraud, each accusation supported by specific evidence and precise dates. Judge Garrett instructed me to falsify survey boundaries on the Morrison Creek mining claim. She indicated the relevant documents. Moving the boundary markers to include federal land that was legally off-limits to territorial mining. Helena Cross presented corroborating evidence from her own investigation. 12 additional mining claims show identical boundary falsifications, all bearing Judge Garrett's official authorization. The crowd stirred as the scope of corruption became clear. Garrett had been stealing from legitimate prospectors across the entire territory, using his judicial authority to legitimize theft on a massive scale. Ezra provided testimony about Morrison's pursuit, describing threats and illegal detention attempts that violated federal territorial law. His background as a former deputy lent credibility to his detailed account of Morrison's criminal activities. Captain Morrison admitted receiving direct orders from Judge Garrett to silence witnesses. Ezra addressed the packed courtroom. He was prepared to use falsified warrants to kidnap a federal witness. Judge Matthews reviewed Morrison's signed confession, obtained during his federal arrest. The document implicated Garrett in conspiracy charges that carried 20-year prison sentences. Morrison has provided complete cooperation with federal investigators, Matthews announced to the courtroom. His testimony confirms systematic judicial corruption spanning 3 years. Garrett sat at the defendant's table, his former authority stripped away by federal jurisdiction. His territorial marshals had abandoned him completely, unwilling to face federal prosecution themselves. These accusations are fabricated by criminals seeking to avoid legitimate punishment. Garrett addressed the court with diminished confidence. This woman is a thief who stole valuable territorial property. Mrs. Stone is a legal witness whose documentation proves your criminal activities. Helena presented additional evidence files. Federal investigation confirms every accusation through independent verification. The hearing continued through the afternoon as witness after witness testified about Garrett's corruption. Legitimate prospectors described stolen claims. Territorial clerks admitted accepting bribes. Mining company representatives confessed to illegal federal agreements. During the lunch recess, Garrett made his move. 3 of his remaining loyal marshals cornered Mercy outside the courthouse, claiming emergency territorial authority to arrest her immediately. Their plan was simple: remove the key witness before final testimony could conclude. "You're coming with us." The lead marshal grabbed Mercy's arm. "Judge's orders." Ezra appeared instantly, his hand resting on his sidearm. "She's under federal protection." "Federal protection doesn't mean anything if she's not here to claim it." The marshal tightened his grip on Mercy's arm. Helena Cross emerged from the courthouse with 2 federal agents. "Release that witness immediately. We have territorial authority." "You have nothing." Helena produced arrest warrants. "You're all facing federal conspiracy charges for attempting to kidnap a federal witness." The confrontation drew a crowd of Pine Ridge residents. Everyone understood this moment would determine whether federal law or territorial corruption would prevail in Colorado territory. "Stand down or face federal prosecution." One of the federal agents stepped forward. "Choose carefully." The lead marshal released Mercy's arm, recognizing the futility of resistance. Federal authority was backed by military force that territorial marshals couldn't challenge. "This isn't over." The marshal retreated toward his horse. "Yes, it is." Helena signaled for their arrest. Conspiracy to obstruct federal justice. 20 years in federal prison. The afternoon session resumed with Garrett's support completely collapsed. His marshals were in federal custody. His territorial authority was suspended. His criminal network was exposed and destroyed. The evidence demonstrates systematic corruption affecting the entire territorial mining system. Judge Matthews summarized the federal findings. Judge Garrett used his position to steal legitimate mining claims worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mercy provided final testimony about the scope of Garrett's criminal enterprise, describing forged documents, bribed officials, and intimidated witnesses that enabled 3 years of systematic theft. I documented everything because someone needed to preserve honest records. She addressed the packed courtroom. Territorial prospectors deserved legal protection from corruption. The verdict was swift and comprehensive. Garrett was stripped of his judgeship and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His co-conspirators received similar sentences. All stolen mining claims were returned to their legitimate owners. Federal oversight will continue throughout the statehood transition, Matthews announced. Colorado Territory will enter the Union with clean governance and transparent legal systems. The courtroom erupted in applause from residents who had suffered under Garrett's corruption for years. Pine Ridge was finally free from the judicial tyranny that had controlled territorial law. Outside the courthouse, Mercy and Ezra stood together in the evening light, their marriage of necessity having evolved into genuine partnership and mutual respect. "What happens now?" Mercy asked, watching federal agents escort Garrett toward the prison wagon. "We build something honest." Ezra gestured toward the mining claims spread across Helena's table. "Your surveys become the foundation for legitimate territorial development." Helena approached them with official documents. "Federal compensation for your cooperation, plus recognition as official territorial surveyor." The papers made Mercy one of the highest-ranking technical officials in Colorado Territory, with authority over all mining surveys and geological assessments. From escaped slave to territorial surveyor in 1 week. Mercy smiled at the transformation. "From desperate fugitive to respected citizen," Ezra corrected gently. "You were never what they claimed you were." The sun set over Pine Ridge, illuminating a community finally free from corruption and ready to join the Union as an honest state built on legitimate law and transparent governance. 1 year later, Pine Ridge had transformed from a struggling frontier settlement into a thriving territorial town. New buildings lined the main street. Legitimate mining operations dotted the surrounding mountains. The corrupt system that had strangled honest development was gone forever. Mercy Stone stood atop the ridge overlooking their mining claim, surveying equipment spread around her feet. Her official territorial surveyor badge gleamed in the morning sunlight. The leather satchel that had once contained evidence of corruption now held maps of their legitimate operation. "Eastern boundary looks promising." Ezra climbed the slope carrying core samples from their latest excavation. "Your geological assessments were perfect." Their mining claim was modest but honest, filed through proper federal channels, and surveyed according to strict territorial regulations. Every boundary marker was precisely placed. Every federal requirement was completely satisfied. Helena Cross, now wearing the robes of a federal territorial judge, approached from the settlement below. Her appointment had been unanimous, supported by residents who remembered her courage during the corruption trials. "Federal Statehood Commission arrives next week." Helena carried official correspondence from Washington. "Colorado Territory's application has been approved." The news meant everything to communities like Pine Ridge. Statehood would bring permanent federal oversight, established legal systems, and protection from the kind of corruption that had plagued the territory for years. "Judge Matthews recommended me for the state surveyor position." Mercy indicated the official letter in Helena's documents. "Complete authority over mining surveys and geological assessments. You've earned it." Helena smiled at the transformation from desperate fugitive to respected territorial official. "Your documentation broke the corruption network completely." Ezra examined the federal correspondence with obvious pride. His wife had become one of the most influential technical officials in the territory, respected for her expertise and trusted for her integrity. Morrison's testimony helped convict 12 more territorial officials. Helena provided updates on the ongoing federal prosecutions. The corruption network extended into 3 other territories. "What about Garrett?" "Federal prison in Kansas, 20 years without possibility of parole." Helena's satisfaction was evident. "He'll never influence territorial politics again." The morning work continued as they surveyed the final boundaries of their mining claim. Mercy's precise measurements and geological knowledge had identified a silver deposit that would provide comfortable income for years. Federal compensation was generous. Ezra indicated the new equipment and supplies surrounding their operation. Washington wanted to demonstrate support for honest territorial development. The federal government had provided substantial financial support for victims of Garrett's corruption, including funds for legitimate mining equipment and legal business establishment. Their operation was completely self-sufficient and professionally managed. 36 mining claims have been restored to their rightful owners. Helena reviewed the territorial records. Your surveys provided the evidence needed to sort out legitimate boundaries from fraudulent claims. Pine Ridge bustled with activity below them. The courthouse handled legitimate territorial business. New businesses served honest mining operations. Federal oversight ensured transparent governance that protected everyone's interests. Judge Matthews is recommending Pine Ridge for the territorial capital. Helena shared confidential information. Federal Commission is impressed by our clean governance and economic development. The possibility excited everyone in the settlement. Territorial capital status would bring permanent federal offices, increased population, and economic opportunities that would benefit the entire region. Citizens are requesting a celebration for our anniversary. Ezra indicated the crowd gathering in the settlement square. 1 year since we exposed the corruption network. Mercy looked down at the community that had supported them during the federal trials. These people had chosen federal justice over territorial corruption, honest governance over familiar tyranny. We should renew our marriage vows. She turned to face her husband directly, this time for love, not survival. Ezra's weathered face softened with genuine affection. Their marriage of convenience had grown into deep partnership and mutual respect, built on shared trials and common purpose. Helena can officiate. He gestured toward their friend. First marriage performed by Pine Ridge's federal judge. The celebration that afternoon brought together everyone who had supported the federal investigation. Legitimate prospectors, honest territorial officials, federal agents, and Pine Ridge residents gathered to witness the renewal of vows that had begun their fight against corruption. 1 year ago, these two people entered a marriage of desperation. Helena addressed the crowd from the courthouse steps. Today, they renew that marriage as a covenant of love and partnership. Mercy wore a proper wedding dress, purchased with federal compensation money and tailored in Denver's finest shop. Ezra wore a new suit, his mountain man appearance transformed into that of a respectable territorial businessman. I promise to support your dreams and share your challenges. Mercy spoke her vows clearly. To build something honest and lasting in this territory we both love. I promise to protect your interests and respect your independence. Ezra's voice carried deep sincerity. To be your partner in everything we create together. The crowd erupted in applause as Helena pronounced them husband and wife under federal territorial law. Their kiss was witnessed by the entire community that had supported their fight for justice. Evening brought quiet celebration as they returned to their mining claim. Federal statehood was approaching. Their business was thriving. The corruption that had threatened their freedom was destroyed forever. From fugitive and hermit to territorial officials, Mercy surveyed their achievements with satisfaction. We built something worth protecting. We built something worth celebrating, Ezra corrected, pulling her close as stars appeared above the Colorado mountains. Something honest and lasting and entirely our own. Pine Ridge glowed with lantern light below them, a community transformed by courage, justice, and the power of truth to overcome even the deepest corruption. Their marriage had saved more than 2 desperate people. It had saved an entire territory's future.